Good evening and welcome. Something a little unusual this evening. I know you probably wasn't expecting to see the two of us. I'm Kerry Ann, and this is my co-host, Sarah. Hello, Sarah.
Hiya.
We are usually found over at Equilibrium Collective, and we have come along this evening because we've done some research as such around Hans Holzer, and who perfect to have a conversation about that than David. So we had a quick contact with David, and this was all set up, and we're so excited to begin. So yeah, thank you for those that are joining us, and I want to say good evening, good morning, and afternoon, wherever you are. But thank you so much for joining us this evening, David. We really do appreciate the opportunity.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Carrie Ann and Sarah. Nice to meet both of you. And, I'll be happy to shed whatever light I can on my affiliation and understanding of Dr. Holzer and his work. So thank you for asking me to be a part of your show.
No, thank you. We first was introduced to Hans Holzer originally when we was doing some research on the Amityville house. Again, we see his association with it, and we come to be familiar with the works that he did with physical mediumship and trance mediumship, which is something that myself and Sarah are really interested in. So we started to explore more and found how we feel how incredibly unusual he is in terms of a parapsychologist, and it really made us really kind of picked our interest, really. So we've got lots of questions that we want to ask about his work, and also how that affected your experiences when you did your research and your investigations. So I hope that's okay for us to just get stuck in, if that's okay.
Dive in. Feel free to ask any questions. And if you'd like, I know we've got a live audience watching. I can throw up some of the questions that they ask if you want me to, or we could just stick with what you guys have. Okay.
No.
Yep, feel free to fire away. Again, I'm not the end-all, be-all knowledge source of Dr. Hans Holzer. I was lucky enough to interview him. I believe we were his last radio interview on Darkness Radio before he passed away. So we were his final radio interview. And then I have been a part of the Holzer Files TV series. I think over in the UK, they call it Holzer's Ghost Files. And we are just... it's a great honor to be able to kind of walk in this legendary investigator's footsteps and look into these cases. So, I'll answer to the best of my knowledge, but I don't know everything about the good doctor. I have a good running knowledge, and that's what I can go with.
No, that's fine with us, honestly. One thing I will say that I found really, really fascinating, and what really stood out against other paranormal type shows, was the real-time footage that's shared throughout the Holzer Files. I love that, they've worked with Civil Leak and the other mediums that were involved. So that's a really interesting touch. How did it feel going through that type of evidence? Almost, go on, sorry.
Well, don't hesitate. Ask your question. I'll stay quiet till you're done. I am blocking a few smartasses in the chat room. So, folks, I'm going to be watching the chat room as well. If you're making naughty, nasty little comments, you will be gone. So, fair warning on that. It was remarkable that this guy was so with it that he recorded everything. Either handwritten notes, typewritten notes, video, audio, photographs. He did whatever he could to try to really capture these moments in time, and to be given this gift of not only just his notes and the over 140 books that he had presented, but to be able to actually kind of use those as a step stool to each one of these cases has been a real gift.
I can imagine. And I've been fortunate enough to go to the college in Kensington, and just to be in those locations, knowing the research that had before us is very humbling. So to actually be able to view that as well, that must have been incredible. So I'm going to start with the first question, if that's okay. That wasn't the first. That was a quick, sorry.
Nope.
So I am a psychology graduate. I'm also I've had experiences with trance mediumship and so forth. The duality of the both is quite interesting, how Hans Holzer was able to marry those together. why do you think that works so well, and how did that influence or impact your research yourself?
You know, I found it fascinating when we interviewed Dr. Holzer. Unfortunately, it was in his waning years, and he was very irritable about the current spate of paranormal television programming. He was not pleased with the way that they conducted investigations, running around, screaming, yelling, whatever was taking place. And he thought that people were too codependent with technology. He developed what's called the Holzer method. And for your listeners, the Holzer method was to go in and keep his mediums, his trance mediums, as empty of information as he could about the locations they were going. He would give them no backstory, no understanding of why they were there or what they were to do. And he would introduce that medium into the element and just let her do what she does. And he worked with some amazing mediums, Sybil Leek, Ethel Myers, and so many others. But those were his two main go-tos. He found that when he trusted and believed in somebody, he turned over full faith to them, and they didn't let him down. And what's interesting is, in creating this paradigm, he was taking psychology as we knew it, understanding what people's relationship to this apparent haunting was. He wanted to understand why they believed they were haunted, and could we corroborate this story or this haunting with factual information from a blindfolded medium, for lack of a better term. And I don't mean literally a blindfold, but giving them no information. And he found that human element, when removed from an investigation, seemed to disconnect the availability of understanding what was really taking place. So he felt that when we become too codependent on technology, and I agree with him, I've slowly over the years taken myself out of the loop of wanting 100 gadgets. Now you'll see me on the show using an SLS camera. An audio recorder is my favorite tool. And I'll play with some of the other things from here to there, but I really want to be in the moment. And I don't want to be focused on this little screen and miss what might be going on in the peripheral. So I like to just kind of soak it in and be in the moment, which Dr. Holzer was about, really kind of examining that, speaking one-on-one with the spirits instead of focusing on the technology. So he really devised this interesting method of allowing the psychology of the haunting to occur naturally without removing elements. You'll see in a lot of the shows, including Holzer Files, that will remove people from a location, will remove certain elements. He would allow people to stay there. Of course, he was keeping the people that were haunted sometimes on hand. They would commence with these seances to try to communicate to the spirits. So he would do it that way. And I think because of his understanding of psychology and respect for it, and the understanding that there is more to the world around us, and that science doesn't have all the answers, but that we should lean heavily into science. His idea was, you give me your information, Carrie Ann, tap in, I'm going to help you. And he worked as a medium to the medium, right? Because the medium, if you listen, there's some chilling audio, right? And it probably isn't really that chilling in the aspect of what it was, but you see these demure women, and all of a sudden, my body, where's my body? And, they buried me. And you hear these creepy, guttural, graspy, gravelly voices coming out of these women. And Hans would always keep it cool. And you'd hear him, well, you're dead. You're quite dead. It's time to move on. And, he was always trying to keep them in control. So he, again, not diving into the letting himself be rattled by what the mediums were doing, by addressing the spirit directly and trying to help that spirit. That's what he was there for. It wasn't even really Carrie Ann and Sarah that he was trying to help, the people that called him in. It was the spirit themselves. And I think that's what he felt most called to do. Not necessarily give you the answers you want. And we see that through the Holzer Files. There are locations that called him in that wanted that stamp of approval that this place is haunted, and it should be deemed as such by the king of the paranormal, right? By Dr. Holzer. And he wouldn't always sign off. He would question, and he'd be like, what you're telling me, Carrie Ann, about this haunting matches up with nothing that Sarah the medium is giving me. So he'd say, there's something interesting here. There is some paranormal activity, but I can't corroborate that it is what you think it is. And here we get to go back 30, 40, 50, 60 years later, reinvestigate. And sometimes we're able to uncover aspects and elements of the haunting that he was not familiar with. He wasn't able to get all that same information because there was no Google, there was no newspapers.com and all these other great resources now that are available to us. So he did the best he could with what he had. But you could see in the stories like Ocean-Born Mary, he wasn't willing to give them the stamp of approval. He smelled that there was something wrong with this story and he stuck by it. And sometimes the mediums would get something totally off base from what they were there for. So he wouldn't go forward. He would just say, this is interesting, but it's inconclusive. And sometimes he would repeat the investigation with multiple trance mediums to see what he could find and glean from that. So we get all those notes and all the audio recordings and everything we can. And we only show segments of what matches with what our investigation is about. So that's kind of why you see it play out the way it does on television.
Yeah, I think some of the evidence or the videos that I see was with Ethel, and it is being in the presence of trance mediumship can be incredibly daunting because the energy, alleged, if you want to call it alleged, but wherever it's, you can feel the energy, you can feel, and even if you don't believe, there's a part of you that is on edge. You're knowing that this is happening because you're right. It is very, like, you're not expecting it. You don't know what's going to come. And then when it does, it can take you by surprise, especially if there's evidence that's being given that it can be validated without the medium knowing. So, yeah, it's I do, even watching it, I got goosebumps.
Well, Carrie, Carrie Ann and Sarah, what I'd love to do, we'd love to incorporate a trance medium on the show. Cindy's open for it. She's not willing to let the spirit work through that way. She does automatic writing and automatic drawing. Yeah. But she doesn't want to let the spirit through her. However, I pushed for the fact, and I don't know if this is why they don't do it, but I said, I believe we have to be cautious in the way we present it. Yeah. Because the one problem we would run into, and I think this is why we don't see many TV shows on exorcism, right, is it looks ridiculous a lot of times when people are trance channeling, right? They're, oh, I feel something is here, and they're flopping and their eyes are rolling back and they look ridiculous. And I don't mean that in a besmirching or a degrading way, but then that takes people out of the moment that are witnessing it, and all they can do is focus on, well, that looks goofy. That doesn't even look real. What is it? What should it look like? Like Whoopi Goldberg, where all of a sudden we see Sam's face floating in front of hers, and that's not how it normally happens. So trance mediumship is allowing that spirit through, and you're fully giving autonomous control to these spirits. So it does look very janky. They haven't been in a body for a long time, so their motions are not right. So, I've even said, well, if we're going to use a trance medium, I think it's okay to start with the trance medium, but kind of do what we do on the show is get away from looking at Carrie Ann doing trance mediumship and show the photos of the ghosts that we think we're communicating with. Show the photos of, the murder or the death, so that you're hearing the voice, which can be chilling and compelling. You're hearing this, but you're not distracted from the flopping and goofy looking nature of it. Yeah,
that makes sense. Okay, well,
and I don't want the trans medium that comes on our show to feel judged either. And you can, a lot of people beat up on Derek Akora on Most Haunted because of how he reacted and twitched and everything. And to them, it looked fake. And I told him in private conversations, I think he'd be better off, Derek, doing it without them filming you. Film it, obviously, but don't show you, show something else. Show the reactions of the other investigators. And he said, there might be something to that because it does, it lines up the mediums. And then sometimes the mediums they have to let go of that moment. That you can't let you be in control. Because if you're doing that and you're second guessing and you're worried about your movements, you might be fighting what would be a natural moment for the spirit to make something known.
Yeah, I agree. I've done lots of talking, so I'm going to pass over to Sarah.
You've done lots of talking. I feel like all I've done. I'm sorry. You ask one question and I ramble for 15 minutes, so I apologize. So Sarah, now that we finally got Carrie Ann to shut up, what did you want to know?
So as you mentioned, he had a degree in psychology, which is really interesting. That he uses the mediums as well. What do you propose his logic might have been on that? Like, why was he so persistent in his use of mediums?
Because they proved right. He would go in and sit down with somebody like Carrie Ann, who's having these experiences, and would have these eyewitness accounts of a soldier walking into a room, or the woman in white, or the headless horseman, right? And what he would do is bring the medium in. Now he's looking at the psychology of, why does Carrie Ann believe she's having this experience? What about it? So he's able to bring that science, but then marrying it with the transmediumship. If the transmedium is getting direct information to that, I'm seeing a woman in white. She hung herself off the top railing. Her heart was broken. She had lost a baby and just couldn't tolerate it anymore. He was getting his answers. It was also escalating. He would ask the person, Carrie Ann, did you ever lose a baby? Yes, I did. I lost a child. Maybe that's why you're communicating with it. That's why the spirit is able to connect with you, because it's grieving in the same way you're grieving. So he could take the psychology of the moment, marry it with the parapsychology of the channeling session, and try to make sense of it. But again, he never put a definitive stamp. He would always say, this is an ongoing story, and we need to continue to push the boundaries and ask more questions and try to understand what the situation is that we're dealing with.
So it's kind of killing two birds with one stone, really, because he's like validating mediumship in its own right, as well as using the scientific basis as well.
Right. That was the best way, right? Because you can't. He was not just giving full into the psychology. He was not giving full into the parapsychology. He was allowing both to live and coexist and corroborate each other. It's like on our show, people, you missed this, Dave. On this episode, this light ball flies past you. Okay, I don't believe or put much stock into orbs and light phenomena unless I can see it with my naked eye. So I'm dismissive of it. So I need corroborative evidence. So I need to see that ball of light, like we did this season, fly over one of our pieces of equipment, and the equipment start to react. We also heard footsteps. We see this light enter the room, footsteps, and then the shadow tracker starts lighting up, which means that this ball of light was something more than just a dust particle or a bug or a particulate in the air. We can corroborate that. So that's what he was doing with this, is he was taking both sides to see if they made sense together, and what could he get from that? Why does it happen? Who is it haunting us? And what can we do to help the spirit? And that was really kind of, again, his main focus.
So, go on.
Hello. Okay, so
does that answer your question? Or
it does,
Okay.
And it's good to clarify.
Good.
With both sides, I believe.
Sure.
So what has been your favorite of his cases to revisit?
Well, Whaley House, because I was so against doing that episode, and it was our first one to film. And I'm like, God, not the Whaley House. Everybody's done the Whaley House. What? There's nothing left to uncover, which was my first lesson from Dr. Holzer. And I believe why serendipitously we went there. Synchronistically, there is no, what's the word now? My mind is completely blank. There is no, I can't think of the word. Everything happens for a reason, is what he would get to say. And I went there to break my paradigm. I went there and we did uncover more, and we were given a deeper look because I asked the right questions and I pushed the right buttons with the people, and we got to see handwritten evidence that this haunting predated, which most people think the house is haunted by the Whaley family. But the Whaleys were encountering a haunting while they lived there. They were having ghostly encounters. That had never been revealed before. And we had the letters for the first time they were able to see these letters and we could share them with the world because it had only been released a few years earlier, but it had never been on any paranormal TV show. So we were able to uncover something. We uncovered a different aspect of the story and a different element of history. And that spirit made itself known very dramatically by knocking me on my butt. So
I see that today.
Right. So I love that one because it again, it snapped my mind into, I can't prejudge. I have to go where the story takes us and allow it to unfold naturally. So that was a big aspect of it to me. The episodes that we did in Cleveland, Ohio this year were pretty impressive. The train yard serial killer, the Franklin Castle, because that was so emotionally impactful to me and what was going on. And the Ocean-Born Mary episode from season 1. It's hard because I look at them all and there's something special and really cool about every episode that I really loved doing and uncovering. A couple come to mind just because, like, Ocean-Born Mary was such a convoluted puzzle, and we pulled all the pieces together and we were able to tell a full story that others had ignored. Franklin Castle has had a false narrative for so long, and so many people, when they found out we were going to be at Franklin Castle, after the fact, we're like, God, I hope you didn't screw this up. I hope somebody finally tells the right story and gives the real history. And when they watch the episode, they were like, God, you nailed it. You finally, somebody did the right story and separated fact and fiction. And even though the former homeowner did not like our answers, we stuck by our guns. And that's all we can do is offer up what we've uncovered, what we know to be the truth, and allow the client or the person we're sharing with to make up their own mind from that point forward. And it won't always be acceptance.
The episodes that you mentioned previously, it actually inspired a thought of mine when I was looking at the research that you guys were doing, and you was able to, I think it was in the correct me if I'm wrong, I do apologize, but the Ocean-Born Mary, when you realized there was a link to a pirate that was meant to have been in one location but had never been there, and all this time someone was looking for this pirate. And what I actually, from this basis, obviously I like psychology and I love paranormal, and I put the two together, and it kind of inspired me to look at false collective memories and the impact that has on locations. When you have a society or a community that's perpetuating this superstition onto a location in terms of energy, the impact that has. So almost in like a weird reverse version of the stone tape theory, in the fact that you have this repeated a collective residual energy that is kind of imprinted on somewhere. So what do paranormal researchers that go in, serious researchers that want to do case studies and so forth, how do they protect themselves from superstition that they aren't aware even exists? Is there a possibility that we can communicate with a spirit? For example, in the Phillips experiment, where we was able to create a ghost, are we able to communicate with a perpetuated superstition? And how do we protect ourselves from that?
Well, that's the concept. I think that's what we have proven, right? There's thought forms, tulpas, these presupposed histories that have been overlaid the truth. And we found the ghost of Ocean-Born Mary, or what element of her was left behind. But we were able to uncover, and for people that don't know the story, it's an amazing story, right? There's this killer pirate who would board ships, and he would take all of the booty that he wanted, and he'd slaughter the people and move on. And aboard the ship, he hears a wee baby crying, and he goes aboard and he says, what's the baby's name? Well, we haven't named her yet. She was just born. Well, if you name the baby Mary, I'll let you and your passengers live on. And then this pirate would come and he gave them gifts, which is true. And then he would come and visit them and visit the girl growing up, and they became friendly and close. And when he eventually died, he was buried under the hearth of this home and reportedly hid treasure on the property. And the former owner, Gussie, and I can't remember his last name, it's like Gussie Smith, would charge people $1.50 or something to rent a spade, and they could go dig up the yard looking. Whatever they found, they had to split with him. But he was making money. Nobody would ever find a treasure because it wasn't real. This pirate legend was true. He did let them live if they named her Mary. And then the rest was people dialoguing and creating their own narrative, and then hung it on poor Mary. And so she never lived in that house ever. Her son owned it at one point, but she was not particularly close with that son and may have only visited once or twice. Gussie would actually have his mother dress in a white gown, and she would appear at the window sometimes while there were visitors outside. He would talk about how empty the house was, and suddenly this ghost would appear at the window looking down, and everybody'd freak out, and then she would fade into the darkness. Or he would send her out walking the perimeter of the property in this white nightgown, right? So that they could, oh my God, I drove by the property and there she was. And it built this legend and lore. The guy was P.T. Barnum, right? He was making his own history. But we found that the house that she did live in that area burned to the ground years ago. And then we uncovered that her house that she grew up in, that she loved, still existed and had been disassembled, nail by nail, board by board, brick by brick, and moved like 150 miles away and rebuilt. And we found Mary there. And there were cool elements about that story that show you why legend and lore should be separated. We know this. The pirate that would take over used to dress in this dandy regalia, this red outfit with a huge feathery plume off his hat, right? When he would board these ships, he was presenting, right? He was like a pro wrestler, right? He was coming aboard and he wanted to make an impression. Well, here's an interesting element. The homeowner didn't know that part of the story. And she said, I've got to tell you, something really weird has happened in the last few days before you came here. She goes, I've had this large red cardinal slamming into my window, trying to get into the home. And then she said, and then it finally stopped and then started hitting the window on the other side of the house. So it was almost like this pirate spirit had taken the form of the bird and knew that we were stirring the pot and wanted to be injected back into the story. And Mary was happy where she was. She got our attention, but it was this kind of, I'm here, leave me alone. And we couldn't tell you where the house was. We couldn't tell you what happened, but it was definitely her house. And that was a cool element. So we could finally put the final stamp on that story for Hans Holzer that eluded him. The story he wouldn't say, yes, this is true, because his medium was picking up a totally different story of ghosts, and none of it had to do with pirates or ocean-born Mary, which makes sense now. So I got to give credit, because listen, I'm on a TV show for 2 seasons and I take a lot of beatings. People are like, you're a fake, you're a fraud, you're faking evidence. It's TV, it's meant for entertainment. None of it's real. He lived through that for a 50, 60-year span of his career, being called a fake, a fraud, a charlatan. And he would uncover things that people would tell him were lies. You know, when he dug into the Amityville case, he uncovered the Native American burial grounds. There's no Native American burial grounds. Just ask the people of Amity. But there are. As a matter of fact, when you dig deeper into the newspapers, which were not available to him, papers now going back into the 1800s, they talk about there were properties on Ocean-born or on Ocean Avenue in Amityville where they were getting ready to lay foundations for new houses, and they were uncovering mass Indian burial sites. So it was true. He wasn't the loon. He knew. And he took that beating and just kept going. He didn't let it affect him. Just keep doing your job. Do what you can and help the ghosts, screw the cynics, right? Move on and do what you can do. And that's all he did. And I give him a lot of credit because, you know, I'm only 2 seasons in, only 23 episodes. And there's days I'm like, I don't know if I can keep taking being called a fake and a fraud and being made to feel like my life's journey and work is a joke to people. But then again, it doesn't matter. It's not about that. That's not why I do it. I do it because I'm fascinated in the story, the history, and trying to set right what once was wrong, right? These fabricated tales of the Franklin Castle where this homeowner supposedly raped and beat and killed employees and impregnated one and did this. None of that's true. And when does that story begin? Not until the 1970s, when this family is living there and it starts to become a bit of a tourist attraction. Then this story blows up, but we can't find any background. And though they'll swear by it and stick to it because they've impressed upon their own minds that that is a true story, you have to upset the apple cart sometimes and tell the truth. And this is what I can tell you. We can't corroborate any of your story because the story didn't start until your family moved in.
Yeah. So when we spoke about Amityville horror, the Amityville haunting, I keep doing that. It's such a Yeah.
That's okay. It was the Amityville Horror. That's what everybody knows it as. That's fine.
Yeah. Now with the use, I mean, I really become aware of Hans Holzer during the seances that he conducted. When I was trying to look into that a little bit, and I was looking at all the different dynamics that was going on inside of that house. You had Hans Holzer and Ethel Johnson was there. You had the Warrens there at the same time. You had Channel 5. Channel 5 crew. How do you think having that many people in that location with lots of different mediums working on different levels, because you had trance mediumship and then you had the Warrens working on mental subjective mediumship, which obviously trance is objective. How do you think that could have impacted a location?
They were charging it, but I still stand on the belief system that the Lutz family did have strange experiences there. I mean, it forced them out after 28 days of living there.
Yeah.
And they forfeited everything. They lost their boats, their house, they were financially screwed. They had to live through the love and friendship of people to let them try to survive after that story broke. And then the children were physically and mentally abused for years by people calling them liars and fakes and frauds. So there was a lot at stake in the story for a family that did not make much from their story. I believe that George Lutz inadvertently or purposefully called forth spirits to help empower him that maybe created a bigger problem. Nobody ever claimed to come into contact with the DeFeo children. Nobody really even claimed to talk about Native American Indians. There was something, but it seemed inspired by the dysfunctionality of the Lutz family, and it left when the Lutz family left. So having all those people in there with different emotions, different theologies, belief systems, and ways of investigating, it may have stirred up some energy temporarily, but I don't know that anybody was getting the true aspect, because as we just talked about with mentally imprinting a location, if they believe they're seeing these things or having these experiences, and then they're being told it might be Native American, are those impressions, those psychic or mental impressions enough for a very good tuned in medium to pick up on that? And then how do you discern between that's a real memory, a place memory from somebody who brought it in with them? And then how do we know that medium is not picking up on the garbage that's with Dave Schrader, Carrie Ann, and Sarah? We're all bringing in our own issues and our own life and our own ghosts and right. And how do we know that they're pulling from the right pool? So that's why we can't ever give a definitive answer to what this is or why it's there. We can pontificate, we can theorize, and we can put it to the test. And that's the best we can do.
So he was also a high priest. So he would have been fully aware about the whole law of attraction and manifesting as well. So I wonder if he might have considered this as well.
Well, you know, he experimented in many different ways, and he was sensitive himself, but he wanted to give somebody else the chance to kind of shine and share. So he wasn't bringing his subjective nature, psychology, or anything to it. He just remained open to what the messages were. And then he would take that message and can I corroborate it? He was a high priest, I believe, in a couple of covens, and wrote books on witchcraft. He also wrote books on aliens, psychic phenomena, Bishop Pike, a lot of great books, but 141 in total. So he really was open to the grand scale and scheme of the world is more than we know or pay attention to. And I think that's why he lived to be 89 and loved his life, because he had all those opportunities, because he fully embraced the eccentricities of life and the afterlife and what people brought to it.
Do you think that there was the possibilities of him using his ritual work in some of his seances, or do you think that he left his belief system to one side? I know you said that they put the medium in, allowed the medium to work in the way that they want, but is there any evidence that he was able to do that as well?
You know, there were notes about him kind of, without calling it setting the intention, that's what you can read into it. You know, there were these notes that he had written about opening up and hoping to focus on this aspect of the haunting to try to get some answers. So again, that's in a sense spell work. right? You're setting the intention, you're breathing life into it, and then seeing what information comes from it. So I believe that he used it to a degree. You'd have to ask Alexandra, his daughter, if he dabbled in the arts to try to make that communication. And he may have at different points in his career, and maybe he didn't like the responses. That's why he left it to trance mediums. I don't know for certain.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So our next question is, again, when we look back on historic cases, how important is it for us to revisit those, and how important is it to always use fresh eyes? And what have we learned from Hans Holzer as researchers? What should we have learned from him?
Oh, so it's a simple question. I like that.
Sorry, there's so many. Let's unpick it.
Right. That was like, so Dave, just a quick question. What is the meaning of life?
Yeah.
So let's unpack that. What's the first part you want me to tackle?
So when we look back at historical cases, how important is it for us to be able to do that with fresh eyes? How do you feel?
Very important, right? That's what we're proving with Hans Holzer's legacy and the show, The Holzer Files. We're going back in, re-examining and opening these case files to try to understand what took place, why they took place, and what that meant at the time. So what can we uncover now that gives us a different insight or perspective into that story? And I have to apologize in a few moments. My door's going to open and all hell's going to break loose for a few seconds as my daughter and son and my grandson walk in. So just we'll ignore that, but I apologize. It's very important. We always should be refreshing. And I hope that in 20 years, there's the Holzer files. Where they go back in and reopen the case files of Dave, Cindy, Shane, Alexandra, and Gabe to conceive the new notions. And hopefully there'll be new technology and new breakthroughs that we could take forward and continue that journey into understanding exactly what is going on.
Okay. The other part of that question.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel that we should have learned, or we should learn from the works of Hans Holzer? What do you think he's changed the game? He changed it back then by introducing two schools of thought that you would not typically put together, or two schools of working, should I say, that you wouldn't typically put together. And he did soldier on with what he wanted and what he thought would be the best way of working. What do you feel that we should learn from him as researchers, as serious researchers?
I think we should learn that children are our future. Treat them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess. And oh wait, no, that's Whitney Houston, not Hans Holzer. Sorry, I get those two confused.
Yes.
I think it's just important to revisit these legends. Dr. William Roll, Ed and Lorraine Warren, Dr. Hans Holzer, D. Scott Rogo, so many of the great authors, and John Zaffis's Dr. Barry Taff, Professor Lloyd Auerbach, people that have done the due diligence to dig into these cases and examine them from different perspectives, and remember them, because it's great that we have this new onslaught of paranormal TV programming. But what does that mean in the whole cosmic scheme of things? And where did we build this from? I know this is going to break a lot of people's hearts, but Jason and Grant and Zach, Nick, and Aaron didn't invent this, right? And a lot of people don't realize that. So I think it's great that we're going back and re-looking at these original cases and what they meant to history and what they mean to us now, and what can we do to re-examine these cases and do right by that history.
Ooh.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Also quite a good idea to like go back in time, as it were, to see how originally these investigations would have been undertaken. Maybe bring back some of the older traditions just to sort of compare.
Yeah, where we've lost
stuff.
Yeah, where we've lost our way, maybe.
Yeah.
Speak for yourself. I haven't lost my way. Stop saying I'm old. I know exactly where I am.
Sorry.
Yeah.
She's not.
I know. Yeah, I like it. Some of the viewers on here and listeners are saying, yeah, the Schrader Files or the Darkness Files. But hey, this isn't about me. And I want people to realize this isn't about Cindy, Shane, Gabe, Alexandra, or Dave. This is about Dr. Holzer and his work. We're just trying to carry that into the next generation and remind people where this started and why it's important to revisit these legends and what they had to offer, and showing you that all the abuse that Dr. Holzer took and getting it wrong. Now here we are 50 years later, proving he got it right. And that was without the opportunity to have all the resources available to him that we have today.
He was definitely a pioneer, that's for sure.
Yes. So I would like to go back to when we spoke about the Whaley House. Now I reached out to you today, and the reason why I did was because I was watching a show where you was featured, and that particular scene was being shown in terms of how to respond to getting activity and how sometimes that can be responded by energy. So what happened there, and what do you think caused the incident? Should we say the incident?
I believe, for those that haven't seen it, it is, I think, episode 3 of season 1 of the Holzer Files, and it's the Whaley House investigation. We, people have gone there for years to communicate with the Whaleys or Yankee Jim. Those were the most well-known and notorious ghosts of the location. But when we uncovered the fact that there was other murders associated, and that, Mr. Whaley was there for all 3 hangings that took place on his property, and was there for the shooting death of one of the criminals at that time. He was there. They made this guy dig his own hole and then stood in front of the hole. And Mr. Whaley was among one of 5 guys that shot him and dropped him into the hole. So it's understandable why these spirits are pissed off. And we kind of kicked the hornet's nest, pulling the spirit out of the darkness and reminding people who he was and telling his story. And I don't think he'd like to be challenged. And, when I was, show us son of your president, were you the one that did this? And we kept playing that EVP over and over because we were blown away. If you haven't seen it, as we're talking about this, I said, were you the one that helped convince Violet Whaley to commit suicide and shoot herself? We heard in the house, and we caught it on film, it sounds like a shotgun goes off. You hear bang in the house, and we all jumped. And I'm like, what the hell? And we play it back. And we keep playing it back. So this spirit just keeps hearing the same call out, and then finally just shoves me, gives me a good old fashioned hit. I thought that a cameraman had come up behind me and tripped into me because it was such force that, somebody with a big heavy camera felt like that would have been what would have hit me and rocked me that hard. And then when I turn around and look and there's nothing there, that's why you see that, look on my face, right? And then I needed to leave because it was just, I wasn't prepared for that. Especially that was the first episode we actually filmed. It was the 3rd one to air, but the first one to film. And I was like, what did I get myself into? My first investigation, and I'm getting knocked down like a sack of potatoes. And I knew it was not going to be flattering because, all 50 years old and my fat ass hit the floor at the same time, and I had to be helped back up. So it was like, I'm too old for this shit, right? So, but I think it was in calling him out and challenging that I think dropped me.
Yeah, so with investigations, you do see that even though in this particular instance, I don't think he was antagonizing whatsoever, but obviously getting a response. We see more and more now in within the paranormal, people having this reoccurring theme of being antagonistic, disrespectful, in the means of being able to get evidence. Is there a place for that? Do you think? Obviously, this is just your opinion, and so do you think that there's a place for that?
Well, again, there's a lot to unpack in that. I mean, what exactly are you hoping to? Yeah, what exactly are you hoping for an answer on? Be specific for me and help me out a little bit. I'm an old man.
I think that in terms of research now, you do have, like you said, there's different types of paranormal shows, and a lot more. You're seeing a lot of antagonistic behavior to get responses. I feel like this is then trickled into our community, and people are doing this more and more in locations. with that happening over and over every night when you go to these places, do you think that there is a time and a place for that? Like that is a good approach to be able to get evidence?
Sure. When you're dealing with an antagonistic spirit, you're in a prison dealing with somebody who killed somebody, murdered somebody, did something horrific, and they're violently shoving and scratching people, being antagonistic. I just tell people, be cautious, because if you ask for an ass kicking, you just might get it. So I tell people to be very cautious in how they do it. But there have been episodes this season when we did the Forever Home episode at this beautiful manor house. This ghost that was on the second floor landing seemed to always be there, but there was something in the basement that was a little darker, and frightened Shane, and he ended up taking a good shove and scraped up his elbow. I went down there and confronted the spirit. They only show the few minutes of, you can't do this, and blah, blah, blah. But what they don't show is that it devolved. I was down there for half an hour. So I started off by being very Hans Holzer. This is not acceptable. You can't do this. This is a good man. And then they kind of cut away. But I said, now let's communicate. Why are you upset? You don't have to stay here. You're not, this is not your eternity. You can go. You can, and I asked for the spirits, ancestors and friends to come forward and help collect these spirits. And that's all we can do. Everybody wants to know every episode, do we clear the spirits? I do the best I can in doing a sealing and clearing prayer at every location, that any spirit that wants to leave or is lost, I just ask, and again, from my Christianity aspect, I just ask the God and the Holy Spirit come in there and help clear the place. But, I always tell people, be cautious and understand what you're at. All right. Waverly Hills. Is it a sanitarium or a sanatorium? Well, what does that have to do with it, Dave? Well, a sanitarium is a place where people with mental deficiencies went. A sanatorium was a place that you went to rest and take care of yourself. And these people were dying of a very painful disease with tuberculosis. And later, a sanatorium for elderly people it was basically hospice for them. So when you see people in there challenging these spirits, I'm like, why? Just be polite. And in a lot of cases, that's when we get our best responses, is when we're polite and show caring and compassion, as opposed to, why don't you come out here and knock me down, right? If you start bullying and pushing, it can be problematic, and I know our brothers from Ghost Adventures took a lot of flack, but again, look at where they're at. They're doing it in prisons and places where people are being attacked by something malevolent. It's not just, so, Zach, I think my dead wife is visiting. Why don't you come out here, Grandma, and show you? He's not doing that. He's not challenging good spirits. He's going to the darkest places where people want help because they feel overwhelmed or they feel like their employees are being harassed. So he challenges those spirits to try to get them out, anger them, so that he can prove, yes, there really is something here. So that, I think people have given a bum rap to some of the shows that challenge, because they're trying to get something to interact with them. And you're only seeing 3 seconds of a 8-hour investigation. And the only reason they're showing that is because that's the moment something happens. I can guarantee you, if they're challenging and nothing happens, it usually doesn't make it on air.
Sarah?
No,
did I melt your brains with that answer? You both kind of look shocked and unsure where to go.
Little bit. I do agree with the whole time and place sort of thing, with the whole antagonizing. I've seen some small-time investigators, like you say, going in to, say, like a children's hospice or hospital, and they're like calling out as if they're like, I don't know. It's just like, why? You're going to scare the children.
Right. I have a dear friend, Susan, who goes in and investigates, and we were at this castle in Canada, and there's these hot spots, and nobody was getting any activity, but they were all, show yourself. What are you here for? What year is it? What's your name? Who's your daddy? They, just pushing all these questions. And meanwhile, Susan and our friend Kimberly are down in the cafeteria, not known to be a hot spot, but they've got a K2 meter and it's lighting up like crazy to their questions. And they're running a recorder kind of as a backup. They get done with their K2 meter. They're very excited. They didn't care if anybody else witnessed it. They had communication they were pleased with, but they listened back to the EVPs and you hear this male voice responding to them. There was only 2 women in that room. And, and at the end, she's like, and I love Susan. She treats ghosts like puppies, right? Everything is like, can you light this up? Oh, you did such a good job. Yes, you did, right? She's very polite and sweet. So she's communicating with the spirits. And at the end, she goes, thank you so much. I know that must have been hard and a lot of expenditure of energy, but thank you for talking with us. And very clearly at the end, you hear this voice go, the pleasure was all mine. Right? So it's an amazing EVP.
Wow.
And everybody else is like, this place sucks. It's not haunted. Well, it's in the approach. And she is polite and sweet to the spirits. And, I think that there's something to that. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So in talking about locations and places that you've been and evidence that you've got, I have, again, 2 questions, but I'll do it in 2 parts. I'm learning. So my first question is your most favorite place that you investigated and the best piece of evidence that you was able to debunk.
Oh, best piece I was able to debunk and best place I've ever, Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky was pretty amazing, and it never let me down. But I have a special affinity for the Stanley Hotel and the Queen Mary Eastern State Penitentiary and Mansfield Reformatory. I did a lot of investigations there, and they were always bonkers. There's also here in Minnesota, the Palmer House Hotel, which is kind of our little gem in the pocket, and it's always crazy. So I love that. The Palmer House in Sauk Center, Minnesota, if people are interested. The favorite piece of evidence that I was able to debunk, I don't know, because once I debunk it, I just kind of get rid of it. I stopped thinking about it. There's, again, orbs. I don't pay much attention to orbs. But then there's all right, here's one of my favorite pieces. When I first started doing Darkness Radio 15 years ago, and for your listeners, they can find our podcast on most podcast platforms. We're 15 years old now, doing the show nonstop in one form or another for 15 years. And they can find those episodes. Just ask whatever device you listen to, whatever podcast device, look for Darkness Radio and you'll find us. But people would send us pictures all the time. And this one picture the woman sent me was an old town in Pennsylvania that was at one point a mining town and had closed down in the 1980s. She goes, there is literally nobody there. It is empty. No people. And she goes, look at this photograph. And she sends me a photograph and I look at it and I don't see a ghost. I don't see a dust orb. I don't see a smear on a window that she's mistaking. I don't see a shadow on the ground that makes me think there's a ghost. And I'm like, my eyes must be failing me. Can you please circle what you're looking at? Now, I saw something in the picture, but it was so obviously not a ghost. I never lend any credence to it. And she sends me back the picture circled, and she has circled the object in the picture. And I'm like, okay, I guess, I'm just going to explain it to her. She's not going to like the answer, but it was, again, closed in the 1980s. So I recognized it for what it was. I looked up James Dean cardboard cutout Coke, Diet Coke. And in the 1980s, they kind of bastardized Elvis, Marilyn, and James Dean. And they did these commercials where they photoshopped a can of Diet Coke in their hands. And there's that famous Rebel Without a Cause pose of him kind of with the rumpled red coat and, pursed duck lips. And he's holding a Diet Coke in his hand. And I send her the picture of that. And I said, what you're seeing is an old cardboard stand-up advertisement for this Diet Coke. And she goes, well, I can see how you'd think that's it, but no, it's definitely something different. I was there. There was nothing standing in the door. So I enlarge her picture and I put my picture directly next to it and stitch them together. And then I circle his hair. I circle the V white t-shirt. You could see the red jackets open slightly and you could see the white. So I circle that and I circle the freaking Diet Coke can in his hand. And I go, I'm pretty certain that is definitely what you're looking at. And her response back was, well, I'm going to take this to a believer. You're obviously not a believer in the paranormal and everything has to have a rational explanation. And you're just never going to see that this is a ghost. And, you know, I don't like to be the bearer of bad tidings, right? So I said, well, I'll tell you what, I re-examined the picture and I think that this store is definitely haunted by a cardboard cutout of James Dean holding a cardboard cutout of Coke. And that was the last thing I heard from her. She was not happy with me. But again, you've got to, you know, I'm going to be honest. Now, I'm careful. Like if Carrie Ann walks up to me at the conference, she's like, Dave, I want to show you this great photograph I've got, right? And it's delightful, what is that, Nebraska accent I'm picking up on you, Carrie Ann?
Yes, yes. What it is.
And she shows me, I'm always cautious and I go, tell me the story about this picture. And because I used to look at it and I go, it's an orb, it's dust, it's a bug, it's moisture, move on with it. And then I would find the story out and it would kind of break my heart. So I've learned to be more cautious. So, oh, Dave, look at this picture. I've caught this ghost. And I'm like, well, tell me the story. All right. And the story was, and you see this blue orb at this wedding, right? The bride and groom are standing there and the priest is up behind them. And you see this blue orb, which is a light refraction. You could see windows and light streams coming in. So you're getting refraction. But when she tells me that story, she says, yes, Dave, my gran, she passed away just before my wedding and she wanted to come and she had this beautiful blue dress she was going to wear and she couldn't make it. And I was so heartbroken. And there she is in this photograph. You could see the beautiful blue orb. I'm like, that's beautiful. And Carrie Ann, I'm so glad that your grandmother was able to make it to your wedding. And I'll leave it at that because I'm not going to tell you it's a refraction of light and hurt your feelings. So I'm always cautious. I always tell people, do you want me to give you the real answer or do you want me to give you the answer you are hoping to hear? Unless, like I said, if you tell me the story up front that it's this, you know, impactful moment for you, I'm not going to take it away. You know, and I've had people that have shown me photographs that they think are their children or parents or grandparents, and they'll tell me this heartbroken, and that's not what I'm about. I'm not going to take that away. So if that makes them feel better to communicate, and who's to say I'm right? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that blue orb really is Carrie Ann's grandmother who showed up in a beautiful blue orb dress for the wedding.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, thank you. We've asked you lots and lots of questions. So I've just gone into the comments and I can see that there's loads there. I don't know if anyone's got any questions they'd like to ask, and if they want to pop it into the comments, and then we can ask Dave or just feel free.
If you have any questions, feel free, and I'll pop them up on the screen here so people can see them. And I'll keep blabbering for a few more seconds about this, but I think it's important when you're looking at the evidence sometimes to give people another chance to look at it that maybe are not as into the paranormal. So if Carrie Ann and I capture this really cool piece of evidence, maybe we call our friend Sarah, who's not really into the paranormal, but she's an intelligent woman, and she's familiar with cameras. And I say, Sarah, Carrie Ann and I caught this photograph. Could you give me any, logical explanation for what this could be? And then you have to be open for that answer. And if Sarah says, yes, it's refraction, right? We have to just go with that answer, and that's it. And understand that maybe she's got a different perspective. It's okay to ask. And that's why I always tell people, when you're putting together a paranormal team, have some ancillary members, right? That maybe not go out and investigate with you, but if you have a local photographer who will look over your photos and give you the perception of, well, this is an artifact that happens when this occurs, right? So this is what you're looking at. Yes, this is going to happen this way because when light source is up closer, everything behind it's going to look darker. So that shadow person you think you're getting is really just as the flash is going, you might be capturing the shadow of the person standing there, and it's cast down the hall, something you didn't see with your eyes, but you caught with this. So a lot of it is just allowing the experts to weigh in, and sometimes it's talking to plumbers, carpenters, people that have a different perspective to what they're doing. Let's see. Paranormal Girl pops up and she says, Dave, what is your next investigation? I'm going to go investigate the refrigerator and find out what's for dinner tonight. That's what my next investigation is. I'm waiting, fingers crossed, for season 3 of the Holzer Files. All of us are sitting on pins and needles because the show has moved from Travel Channel to Discovery Plus, a much larger streaming platform. And let me give all these people watching and listening a bit of advice. There's a free 7-day trial. So go try the free 7-day trial. Watch 2 seasons of the ghost show, The Holzer Files. See it, catch up with it, and then decide if you want to subscribe or not. And if you don't, that's fine. But if you have, watch the show. So try that. But my next investigation, I think it's at the Belvoir Winery in June or July with Amy Bruni and Adam Berry from Kindred Spirits and a few other investigators. So I believe that that's the next one that I'll be doing. And then I'll hopefully get to a couple more locations. And that one is not a televised event. That is just a paranormal conference and investigation that we're doing. So thank you, Paranormal Girl. We appreciate you watching today and kicking in with a question. Let's see here. Stephen Larkin says, Dave, who is your favorite paranormal investigator to work with? Again, that's tough, right? I want to say my teammates on Holzer Files because I do love them. Shane and I are like brothers, even though I have to send them to the worst places in the house. We are like brothers. I'm just the big brother that's a jerk. And Cindy, I love Cindy. She's so good at what she does. But I've investigated my friend Susan, who's amazing at EVP, and doesn't get any recognition because she's not on TV. But she was great. Mark and Debbie Constantino, rest their souls, were fun to investigate with. I've had a chance to investigate with the Ghost Adventures and Paranormal State Kids. I did an episode of their show called Paranormal State. The episode is called First Contact, where I take them out UFO hunting. I got to do, I've worked with Jason and Grant and Steve and Dave and so many of the members of TAPS and Ghost Hunters. They were fun. Everybody brings a different element to it. So I've really enjoyed it. And Chris Fleming is one of my dearest friends, and he's an amazing medium. And then, of course, I'd be remiss not to say Jeff Belanger, the investigator and researcher, who's the lead writer and researcher for the Ghost Adventures TV show. So those would be among some of my absolute favorites. David Clark says, so for fans of Holzer Files, Dave, how can we plug in social media to get a season 3? Your guess is as good as mine, David. Just keep pummeling social media with hashtagging and tagging the Discovery Plus, Discovery Channel, and Travel Channel. Let them know that you want more Holzer Files. That's all you can do. And most importantly, watch the show. So if 10 million of you go sign on for 7 days and watch the Holzer Files, binge your way through the 23 episodes of 10 in season 1, 13 in season 2, that sends a pretty good signal to them that the show's being watched and you like it and you want us back. Laura says, how do you feel about Hans Holzer and how he investigated compared to how Harry Price had done it? Again, I'm all for different viewpoints, and I've learned from Lorraine Warren. I've talked with her extensively. I've learned from Dr. Barry Taff and Lloyd Auerbach and all these great friends that are investigators on TV. And then Dr. Holzer, I don't think there's any one particular right way to do it. I think by absorbing all of this and kind of blending them and seeing what works for you is the best way to carry on an investigation. Is that opening any other questions for you ladies?
I have a question for you, actually.
Okay.
I would like to know if you'd ever be coming over to the UK. You'd fit right in with that accent, I'm not going to lie. I would believe. Yes.
That was pretty impressive, to be fair.
I will say, Sarah sounded more breathy than me, more sultry.
I was going for that sultry sound. It's funny. I went to England a few years ago. I think in 2017. I did 2 events there where we took people on a long tour throughout England to all these great haunted spots. I've been to Romania, Germany, Prague, Scotland, Ireland. I had more trouble understanding English people in England than I did in any of those foreign countries, right? I was like, what language are they speaking? I could not understand English people. It was amazing to me. And I don't mean that to sound racist or dismissive in any way, but it was like, sometimes the English accent is like, what? But
There's also a lot of different slangs depending on where you go.
Oh, I know that rhymey-timey one, right?
My dad's a fluent Cockney, and that's all he speaks. And even I have to go, what was that? What do you mean?
Yeah. So I have a hard time with it, but I'd love to get back over there. The 2 England trips we do sold out. That was our fastest selling foreign trip. So I definitely want to get back. We didn't even get to, it was a very small chunk of your country, which is not a huge country. And we still only got a small chunk of it in the 7 to 10 days we were there. So I'd love to come back and hit up new locations that we didn't get a chance to visit with. So yes, I would definitely be interested in making my way. And hopefully if we can extend Holzer Files a few more seasons, Dr. Holzer did a lot of investigations all over the UK and around the world. So I'd love to get out there and tackle some of those cases.
Especially his link with Sybil Leeks, and she's from the UK.
Yes.
Her house and shop is still standing where it once was. It's still a shop. It's a witch shop. It sells all kind of witch attire. Yeah, so that's somewhere we've become quite familiar with Sybil Leeks when we were doing the research with Hans Holzer, and she is a phenomenal woman. We literally want her to be our witch mum. That's what we want, and she's amazing. Afterwards, we was like, I can't believe her. The things that she did was amazing. Yeah. In general, even with the work that she did during the war and stuff like that.
What she put up with as well. She got discriminated against loads.
Yes. She was witch and she was proud. She was there and she was saying it loud. She didn't care who questioned it. Yes.
Ooh, shit, Carrie Ann's breaking down her rhymes on me now. I feel like I'm listening to English rap music. Please go on.
It was so liberating reading about her stuff and the things that she did, considering the time that she was in, and the work that she did with Hans Holzer as well was phenomenal. Her trance mediumship and stuff like that. So I think that would be a great link for you guys to come over and do a little bit more on Sybil Leeks and what she did over here.
We'd love to, as long as we get more seasons. So I'm hoping. Yeah. But maybe what we'll do is, even when I come out to England to do a tour with listeners, and you guys, for people that are interested, keep checking out darknessevents.com, all one word, and you'll see where I'm going to be and what we're doing and where we'll be visiting. We had a Scotland trip that we were supposed to do in 2019 that we had to push off to 2020. Or I'm sorry, not 2019, 2020. Then we had to push it off to 2021, and unfortunately, the countries still are not real open and fluid, so we're actually moving that to September of 2022. That will be coming out to Scotland and doing some trips. So I'm hoping to get out there and see it. Leslie Ramsey says, which case couldn't you investigate that still fascinates you? Amityville. I would love to at least get an opportunity. Now, I am doing a special Holzer's Ghosts episode, which is like this video that we're making right now. I do these every Thursday night live where we reinvestigate the episodes, but we're going to do a special Holzer's Ghosts Amityville case and talk about what Dr. Holzer believed, and we've got some great guests that are going to be a part of that. And I'm trying to think, the overseas cases, I would really love to investigate the home of, now his name is evading me. He wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And I can't remember his name. I apologize. But he always claimed he was going to haunt his house after his death. And Hans Holzer went out to investigate that as well. So I would love to do that. Here's a great question. Michael says, would you say you're a true believer in the paranormal? I am, with a skeptical eye. Yes, Michael, I call myself a skeptical believer. So I've had experiences my whole life, but I don't believe every experience. Like looking and debunking that photograph of James Dean in the doorway. I'm willing to look at them pragmatically and do what I can. Sometimes I also look at really great evidence and I try to talk myself out of believing it's paranormal. So I've got to be cautious with the cynicism as well on that. What does this one say? Laura says, how do you feel about how Hans Holzer is how he investigated? Oh, we already did that one. Sorry about that. Who's your favorite investigator? I think we did that one. I thought there was another question I missed. Let me see if I can find it here real quick. Yes, Susan wants to know on Thursday nights when I do my live shows like this. It's Thursday, 9 p.m. Central, 10 p.m. Eastern. I think it's 3 weeks from Fridays in England. I don't remember how the whole time frame works out there. I think you guys are 6 hours ahead of me. over there, but it's 9 p.m. Central, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. And Paranormal Girl says Washington Irving is the author. Yes, thank you very much. Sarah Payne wants to know, Dave, have you ever taken anything home with you? You know, a couple of hand towels, you know, no, spirit wise, I don't know, because I don't have discernment to say, yes, this ghost that's bothering me at home came from the Queen Mary. I don't know. They don't carry a passport to tell me where they came from, and I have no way to see it. I think there's been a few that have been attracted to my energy and want to follow me along for a while, but I usually try to get them out pretty quick because I have kids and I take it very seriously. But, you know, when we wrapped up the season, our season finale that we filmed was the Queen Mary. And we came home and we had a lot of weird shit happening in our house. But my father-in-law had just died a few months earlier. Our neighbor who was into the paranormal just died. So it could have been either one of their spirits trying to make communication. Plus my mom passed away 5 years ago. Her mom passed away 4 years ago, my wife's mom. So, you know, it could be any one of those different things. And I can't tell if it's a ghost from the Queen Mary or from here. Look at this, guys. Lauren Menendez says, Carrie and Sarah, love your accent and eye makeup.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah. Very nice.
Thank you so
How come
much.
nobody's talking about my makeup? What the hell?
Oh, you look dashing.
Yeah.
Sandra Harbison says, what do you think about the Ipswich story? 15 years of doing the radio show, so many different stories and topics. I can't keep them all straight. So ladies, I will leave it to your help here. The Ipswich story. What is it? Inform us, please.
Well,
You don't know either?
I've never heard of the Ipswich story.
All right. Well, look at this. Thank God for the Google. Let's go in here and we're going to try this. I'm going to look it up. We're going to do this live
It
research.
does ring a bell for me, but I don't want to say anything and then look like twat.
Yes, no looking like twats today, please. Good God. Am I going to get in trouble for saying that? I don't know what the power is with that. 5 of Ipswich's most haunted revealed. Discover Ipswich. Haunted houses of Ipswich. Historic Ipswich. Haunted Ipswich. There's a lot of Ipswich stories, so I don't know which one you're referring to. So I'm sorry I can't answer it, but I'm not familiar. Email me, Sandra Harbison, dave@darknessradio.com. Send me links about the specific story you're talking about, or send me a ghost story about it. I'd love to talk about that in the future. Sorry, I don't know more about that. Yes, go ahead, ladies, please.
No, obviously we don't know very much about the Ipswich story, but I'm not sure if we're still talking about that. There's only a few locations really in England that really come to mind when we talk about massive hauntings. For example, 30th Drive, and we've got the so in Pontefract that is, and we obviously have the Enfield haunting, and we have a lot smaller ones as well. What I found with this point that I'd like to make, I'd like to get your opinion, Dave, is that when we were looking at the Amityville haunting in particular, we found that we was able to find a lot of resource. We was able to find a lot of interviews, a lot of conspiracy theories, lots of great stuff. What I found in 30th Drive, which is something that is happened at the same time as Amityville in the 60s, around about that era. It has the same kind of commonalities, and the variables are kind of really the same, dynamics of the family and so forth. However, there is no research in terms of interviews of the family. There's nothing. The only thing you find with this type of haunting is just investigations. As a researcher going forward, when we look at these types of places and we want to get a better understanding, a broader spectrum of information, we are going off of investigators that have been investigating on the basis of investigators. What complications can arise from that?
I wish I knew. I mean, obviously, there's already a lot of bad information given, you know, like Franklin Castle, Oceanborn Mary, people. If you post it somewhere and then it gets reshared in 40 different places, then you start seeing like MSNBC or CNN or People Magazine. They go out and source ghost stories around Halloween. So when they go, they source it and then put it in their article. It becomes real because People or Time or Newsweek or Life Magazine posted about this ghost story. But you can actually track that story right back to its genesis point. and realize that there's only one person that ever said this happened, and they never even investigated there. So it's very, you have to be cautious. It doesn't mean that we can't go in there with an understanding of what experiences paranormally have occurred there. But what can we go in and try to find out from that? Unfortunately, a lot of times we find out nothing. We just go in and it could be a ghost that has nothing to do with that location. Maybe it's a transient ghost who just realizes, there's a lot of people that hang out there. I think I'm going to go haunt that place, right? And they go hang out there and haunt it. So you got to keep your mic on so they can hear you laughing and they don't realize I'm just being a dick doing bad English accents, right? So no problem. Because I do these accents and you two are laughing with your mics off and it's just like crickets in the background. Everybody that just listened to the audio, they're going to be like, Dave, that's uncool, man. So you got to be real careful with. At
least you don't sound Australian. I found when Americans do English accents, they tend to sound Australian.
It slips into that. I can't even do a cowboy accent without it beginning to sound Australian. I think Australian is the original language or something because we all, whatever fake we try to get into, we end up sounding that way. Tanya Fulton says, do you have a podcast? Yes, Darkness Radio. And we release new episodes every Wednesday, Thursday, and sometimes Friday. Do we do one about Hans's investigations at Amityville? Not yet, but as I said, that'll be coming up in the next 3 or 4 weeks. Do you think the current owner will ever allow another investigation? No, because I believe, if I understand this right, and we're going to find out more about this in my interview, when you buy the Amityville house, you are not allowed to allow filming inside of it. You cannot turn it into a bed and breakfast or a hotel. You cannot make it an attraction or a museum. It has to be a house. We have somebody that did investigate it in 2017 that's going to join us on the show and talk about the current. I mean, that's as close as I get, 5 years, where we'll be able to find out what's going on there and what kind of stories they have uncovered. All of the past owners after the Lutz have claimed that nothing has happened there. But then what's interesting is there are some stories where they've claimed nothing has happened there. And then one of them actually is credited as saying, and all this that's happening is because of George Lutz. And so is nothing happening or is something happening? But I think the catalyst was the Lutz family and they're gone and they kept dealing with it and they had to be exorcised in California. So I think that was the end of the story. I think that's it, except for this great comment. Jennifer Lynn Stewart says, Darkness Radio is my favorite podcast. Thank you. And for those of you that are listening to your show going, why is Dave reading all of this? This is my video stream. I wanted to help these young ladies with their podcast and their video program. And it just, I said, well, we could do it today and I'll just do a live video stream and I'll give you the video when it's over, but I can get all the questions and everything. So I apologize. I keep taking over, but I'm the one that can access and throw these questions up on the screen. We'll ask just one. Glenn from Sacramento says, probably been asked about 1 million times. The Holzer Files going to end up on Discovery Plus only, like Ghost Adventures. Yes, Glenn, we've answered it 1,000 times. It's on Discovery Plus. That's where it lives. It was moved over. Most cable channels, I think, are just going to go the way of the dodo bird. People have been whining and complaining for years that, I'm spending $200 a month for cable and I'm really only watching 6 channels. How can I get it a la carte? Well, now you're getting it. And when you get the subscription to Discovery Plus, you're getting like 25 different networks, 25 different channels, over 55,000 hours of programming plus exclusive programming. So it's going to live there, Glenn. That's where you'll be able to find it now. They may, I don't know this to be true, but they may show reruns 2 or 3 years down the line from here on Travel Channel, but I don't know. They own the product. We film it. They own it. They can do with it as they please. So please don't be mad at the people on TV because we have no say in how any of that goes down. So ladies, because this is running on my video stream right now, please introduce them again to yourselves and your show so that all the new viewers that are checking this out and will continue can find you and follow your journey.
Thank you so much. So I'm Kerry Ann and I'm joined with Sarah, my co-host, and we are part of Equilibrium Collective. If you find us on YouTube, but we are on Facebook, it's Equilibrium Paranormal UK. It's Equilibrium Collective or Equilibrium Paranormal UK. And yeah, at the moment we're just doing the best, living our best podcast life. But obviously once things change, then we'll be going to do research, sharing our journey with you, with people that want to join us and go to locations, and yeah, lots of fun adventures that we hope to participate in the coming years. So yeah, thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you so much for having us. I've had such a great time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to share some insights with you on Dr. Holzer. The books, many of his books are out. As a matter of fact, his daughter Alexandra re-releases quite a few of them, so you can find them on Amazon.com. You could find them on Audible, so you could listen to these great books on Dr. Hans Holzer. Educate yourself. Remember the legends that came before that set the precedent for the popularity of the paranormal today, and revisit those cases, because there's a lot to uncover there. Carrie Ann, Sarah, thank you for your time and interest in Dr. Hans Holzer and in the Holzer Files. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you
very much.
All right. Stay safe. Be kind. Love one another. We'll see you guys again soon. And thank you for visiting along with us here on today's program.